Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll give folks just a moment to join in, and then we'll get started in just a second here. As we begin, feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from. And if there's anything you want to make sure that we cover today, we'll be going over everything you need to know for using remote monitoring for land conservation and stewardship work. So we're really excited to hear what you all are interested in learning today. So Kate is joining me here as well. She's going to be helping to monitor the chat and doing our Q&A at the end. But yeah, we're really excited to have you all here. I'll go ahead and get started with a little bit of overview to kick us off. But again, welcome. We'll be going over today how to use Lens for land trust. My name's Jake Faber. I've been here at Upstream for about the last 3 years. Upstream, if you're not familiar with us, we are a mission-driven tech company. We develop software tools that help to accelerate the pace, scale, and the impact of conservation work. We have a great team that is focused on anything ranging from remote monitoring and land conservation to software engineering and environmental sciences. And so we built Lens to really help make remote sensing as accessible and efficient as possible. We have a really easy to use tool that's focused on conservation and resource management specifically. So that's what we'll be talking about how you can access today. So Lens is a tool, like I said, we built this about 5 years ago, originally in partnership with Nature Conservancy. We've worked with a number of different land trusts and refined things over the years. But still at its core, Lens is a really easy to use web-based application that any team can use as a one-stop shop for satellite and aerial data. We have all sorts of tools in there as well, so that when you have access to that, you can streamline all of your monitoring, your planning, and different kinds of analysis to understand how the landscapes that you care about are changing. Again, we built Lens for land trusts. So the idea here, and I'll show you as we get into the demo phase of this exactly how everything works. But with Lens, you can monitor your whole portfolio right in one place. We have access to all the top satellite and aerial data from a bunch of different partners so that you can get real-time information about the places that you protect. It's also meant to make it really easy to work collaboratively so that you can monitor properties with your entire team and all share insights together. Something else that I think is really important for a lot of folks that are familiar with using geospatial data for conservation, it can be really difficult to get started. There can be a lot of learning curve, and we try to do as much as possible to reduce that with Lens. So you can get started without the need for any GIS experience. So you can just get right in and answer the questions that you have about your own work priorities. Another thing that's important to mention as well, we make it very easy to meet land trust standards and practices. Lens was built with those standards in mind. And again, these easy to use tools make it really straightforward so that you can do all of your annual compliance monitoring for stewardship, as well as work towards really effective land conservation and managing new projects. So for whatever you need, making sure that you are able to do that work as diligently and effectively as possible. So getting into the meat of this a little bit, the key thing that drives the work that we do in Lens is all of our partnerships with these great data vendors that we work with that are producing so much really, really insightful information that our partners can use. So that's going to include satellite and aerial data from companies that we partner with, include Maxar, Airbus, Planet, and others. We also have a ton of publicly available data as well that we pull in from sources like the European Space Agency, USGS, and others. So I feel like a really good starting point here is just to kind of see a little comparison of what these all look like. So these are some of the most classic starting points for what we're going to do when we get into remote monitoring is just looking at the landscape and seeing what we can see. So here's a little comparison that shows you some of the different specifications that we might think about when we're choosing which of those many data sources is going to be most helpful to answer the questions that we have. So you'll see here, these are arranged by spatial resolution. So up on the top, those numbers refer to basically how much detail you're going to be able to see. So the 0.3 meter, 0.5 meter resolution, that's going to give us a really crisp way of seeing details like new structures, trees, or maybe you're interested in monitoring any cutting, permitted or unpermitted. And then on the other end, we have some coarser resolution data like the 10-meter data from Sentinel-2, which is a satellite program that comes in every 5 days globally. That's another thing we can work with, is things like the frequency of when this imagery comes through, how far back in time it goes. So the idea here is that because we have these different partnerships, you can very easily get in and choose different data sources that are best suited to the work that you're doing. And I'll show you as well when we get into taking a closer look at Lens, what that actually looks like to order up some of that imagery from those commercial vendors and make those choices. But once we have access to that data, there are a ton of things that suddenly become possible. So first off, maybe most intuitive, is just that we can really quickly observe any changes on the landscape that might have bearing on how we would go about managing different priorities in our work. Here, we're taking a look at a wildlife corridor in Texas. This was a project that was completed just a couple of years ago, and we can see just how much of a difference this makes in preserving habitat connectivity across this highway. Now, aside from just those, more immediate changes like a construction project, we also can evaluate some of the longer term impact. And this is really where imagery can be extremely helpful to see things that the human eye just is not great at observing in a one year to the next sort of way. In this case, we're looking at a tree planting project as part of a mitigation bank project in Florida. And so here we can see over many years as those trees are starting to mature, what that new habitat type that we're going for is starting to look like, and we can even measure that change. Disturbances are another really great example here of why satellite data can be so powerful. This is an example from a wildfire a couple years back in California. So here, what we're looking at is changes to the actual vegetation productivity. So if you're familiar, this is an index called the NDVI, or the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. Basically, what that tells us is where on this landscape vegetation is really active and doing well. So here we can see that before the fire, this was a really productive forest. And then after the fire, there are some spots where that's really been declined because of these burn scars. So it makes it easy for us to see that as the change is happening, in this case, every 5 days even. Taking that even a step further, we can do something which I think is really cool. We can also automate some of the notifications of when those changes are happening, whether or not we know to look for them. In this case, again, a California example, we can see this area that Lens has estimated saw an impact to a drop in vegetation. We know, because this is a working forest that's seen a lot of timber harvest, that that's because of a logging operation that happened. So even if we didn't know that that was going on, we could help to get a tip so that we could go and follow up as needed. I'll be showing you more about how that works later. Of course, with private land conservation that we do with land trusts, we're often working with landowners and in communities where it's really important for us to understand who our neighbors are, who our partners are. And so monitoring land ownership is something else that I know can be a big challenge. So something that we do in Lens, we also partner with a data provider that has some really fantastic parcel data so that we can monitor that land ownership. They have 100% coverage across the whole country, and we can do a lot of really cool things with that. So again, not just what the landscape looks like, but some other features as well that can really help us as land trusts to understand what the communities that we're working with are dealing with. Now, it's all great to be able to see this information and make these interpretations and observations and all this cool stuff. But of course, maybe the most important thing is being able to share that out so that we can follow up and we have these long-term records so that when we're doing the work of stewardship, which, as you all know, is often in perpetuity, we need to make sure that we are doing our diligence to take the observations we're making today and know that they are going to be used for a long time to come. In Lens, we can take all of that work that we're doing now and make these really easy reports so that we can share that out and always refer back and share that with partners. Now, after all this is said and done, there are a lot of different reasons that land trusts get into remote monitoring in the first place. And I actually myself used to work in grant making around this, helping organizations get started to use more of these types of tools. And one of the things that I get most excited about here is how much time and cost can be saved from trying some new things. So here are a couple examples of folks that have gotten into remote monitoring with Lens. and seen some really fantastic results. Nature Conservancy in California specifically found 81% cost savings in their easement monitoring program from using Lens. We worked with a number of land trusts through Keep It Colorado, which has a great partnership with that coalition to make remote monitoring more accessible. Lower Shore Land Trust in Maryland saw an 84% time savings for their staff team in monitoring, which, if you know anything about stewardship, it's tough work and it takes a lot of time. And so anything that we can get back there to help make our work on the ground as focused and prioritized as possible is always a good thing. So again, we've got a number of different partners that we work with who have been using Lens for a number of years now. We have anyone from the Nature Conservancy to a number of smaller regional or even local land trusts. In total, we've got more than 200 different land trusts alone that are using this, and they monitor more than 56 million acres globally. So quite a big footprint just for that community that we work with. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at some examples in Lens, and we'll walk through some of those different features that I mentioned, but hopefully that gives you a nice overview of what to expect with all of this. So here, let's take a look. This is what Lens looks like. As I mentioned, it's a web-based application. So what that means is that as an organization, you can sign up to have an account where anyone on your team can get in and share visibility into all the different projects that you're working on. So here, for instance, if I want to go into my easement monitoring portfolio, I can see a number of different sites that we might be looking at and who on my team is taking care of those. Now, the reason we want to start out this way, identifying the properties that we're interested in, is that that's going to help us to figure out what data sources are available for that location. So first thing that we do is we can either add shapefiles in here. I can even draw something on the map or add by tax parcel. There are a number of different ways that we can define those. But once we have those in, we'd have free reign to do all sorts of cool things with each of those sites. One important thing that I'll mention here as well is that you can see I've got a bunch of different properties in here in this easement monitoring portfolio specifically. You can add as many sites as you'd like to Lens. So this can be your easements, preserves, projects that you're working on in your community, anything like that is fair game here. So here I thought we would start out with one site that I've been really excited about in Maryland. So this is one that a colleague of mine was really involved in a couple of years ago, participating in some watershed restoration work. So right now, we're looking at the property boundary here in white. And then you'll also notice there's a buffer area here, recognizing that things like encroachments are always going to be important for you to see. We make sure that you can see a little bit beyond that boundary as well. So we're looking at two different images here, and I've got my compare mode on. This makes it really easy for us to see change over time. So I have on the left an image from July of 2015, and on the right, I have an image from October of 2022. So if I zoom into a particular area, I can get a bit closer look at any changes that might be happening there. So here already I'm noticing one thing where there's a little bit of a pond that's starting to be created by that 2022 image. That hadn't been there in 2015. So first thing that we do once we load up our property is that any publicly available data that we can get our hands on, we start to process. So what that means is that here in Maryland, for instance, we have imagery from USDA that goes back to 2005. So in this case, we get that imagery just about every 2 years. And so we can make these comparisons and go a little bit further back to sort of orient ourselves. Typically for land trusts, what we're interested in first and foremost is going to be a recent high resolution image that helps us to see what the current conditions are. So to do that, we're going to tap into some of those commercial data partners that we have. To do that, I'm going to come over here to the Fork tab. So since we already defined this area and we know exactly where we want to look, we can cross-reference that with the different vendors that we work with to see what images they have available. For instance, I might be interested in this Maxar image from September, one from August. I can see all these different images from this year that I have to choose from. So in this case, I'll come over here and get a preview of one that looks interesting to me. So in that case, this is a 513 acre image, and that is going to cost me $30 if I want to go ahead and get my hands on that. What's really cool about this is that Lens serves as sort of like a buyer's club for imagery. So we have a great coalition of conservation organizations that we work with, And we have a bunch of data vendors who have a lot of tools that usually are not super accessible to those kinds of nonprofit organizations. So by making it easy for us to tap into those resources, you can come in here and just get as much or as little of that imagery as you need. Now, if I'm doing my annual monitoring this year, I might order this image up and then load it into Lens. It'll be available then for you to look at, usually within about 5 to 10 minutes. I should note also, I'm not sure where everyone on the call today might be located, what sorts of landscapes and properties you work with, but let's say that you have some larger sites, even not even just a couple hundred acres, maybe a couple thousand acres. I know especially some folks think out west who are managing larger ranch land might be managing like quite a lot when it comes to individual easements. Something that we can do is also order partial areas here. Let's say that I'm interested in just getting imagery for this southern portion of that easement. I can come back to that same image that cost me $30 and instead just pay 11 to get a closer look at just that part of it. So it gives you a lot of control over where that's coming from. Now, one thing that I'll say as well, when it comes to all this imagery, these are images that have already been captured from these vendors. So as these companies like Maxar are going around the world producing imagery every day, these become available for us to use. So we're constantly seeing new things come in. Usually about 24 hours after an image is captured, we'll have access to it. Now, if you want, you also can do what's called tasking, and that's a process where you're making a custom request in Lens to say something like, hey, Airbus, I would like an image of this particular place, this particular time, and we can help facilitate that so that you get it. So a couple different options that you have there. Now, once we've got the data, we've loaded up our properties, now we can start to really make these observations and see what we can see. So what I'm going to do is come over here to some of the notes that we've already made for this site. I'm going to go back and look at these chronologically. So like I said, my colleague Clay was one who originally was working with this site, and he added some really helpful context to help get me up to speed. So this is an area north of Baltimore that's prioritized for some stream and floodplain restoration. Great, that's really helpful to know. Now, as I go along, I can see some specific things that he was working on. In this case, here's a pasture that was taken out of production, and a buffer was planted around this stream that you can see running through the property here. So if I take my little compare mode and I can take a gander at this, sure enough, I can see that, yeah, it looks like this area is starting to renaturalize a little bit. That's cool. This is also part of what later became wetland easement. Small area of just 10 acres. And in 2010, we can see that there was, so this was just the year after that easement was created. In the time since, there's been quite a lot of change. So now we've really started to see regrowth of native vegetation here, which is really cool. So a lot of really interesting stuff going on. Now, I mentioned earlier that little area with that pond that seemed to have cropped up in the last couple of years. Well, that's because as a result of that restoration and reforestation work, there was some beaver activity. And so here we can see the before and after of where that took place. Now, so far, we've just been looking at this imagery visually, right? So this is as it would look if we were up above that landscape looking down. Obviously, that's a really helpful perspective to bring to stewardship work, but something that we can do to make that even more effective is to start to quantify some of the change that we see. So in this example, I'm going to come down here to see some other types of data that I can work with. So far, I'm looking at tree color. Well, let's come down here and take a look instead at something like surface moisture. Where you see the S2 here, that refers to the Sentinel-2 satellite. So that is the one that I mentioned earlier, is 10-meter resolution and comes in every 5 days. So take a look at that for before, and I'll also grab an after, and we can see sort of what that is starting to look like. So here we see that it's quite dry, and over here we see that there's a little bit of moisture that we're starting to pick up. Something that I was interested in was a little bit of an analysis. So I can just select an area that I'm interested in and say, all right, over the last handful of years, tell me what that surface moisture has been doing. So here I'll run that analysis. And what's going to happen is right now it's pulling imagery from every 5 days going over the last 10 years and starting to crunch the numbers for me, tell me what the surface moisture trends have been. So this is a really helpful tool, this analysis option right here, that we can use on any site And that draws from some of the public imagery that we load up. So it doesn't even rely on you ordering any commercial data. So we can do this with anything from surface moisture to vegetation. Again, thinking of something like wildfire, we can maybe plot out what the change and effect of vegetation from fire has been. So here, though, now we've got that data all loaded up, we can see where on any given date surface moisture landed. So here we can see that the index was getting quite high around about 2022. So really helpful to be able to see that longer term change like I was mentioning earlier. Now let's hop to a different site, one that I really like because this is in my neck of the woods here in Philadelphia. This is a suburban conservation easement, 90-acre parcel. Again, boundary is here in white, and I'm looking right now at an image from this past summer. So there's quite a few interesting things that have been happening on this site specifically. And one thing that I'm going to do is also add a little bit of context. So we've got these different overlays. And on this one, there's a building envelope that affects where the landowner might be able to do certain activities. So I can overlay that building envelope so that we can sort of carve that out and figure out like, what's happening where. Come back to my notes here. Again, I'm going to sort this so that I can start at the beginning. Katie was the first one that came in here and noticed that back when she was looking in December of 2022, she was looking at images from 2 prior years and saw there were some trees that had been removed right outside that building envelope. Now, I don't have the deed for this easement, so I don't want to say what was going on here exactly, but that's something that I would probably want to follow up with. Potentially, if that was happening inside the building envelope, maybe that was something the landowner was able to do. It's possible this was a reserved right, or maybe it's some sort of enforcement action. So that's the kind of thing that as we start to observe, we can then decide where we want to go. Now, we also can tag notes in different ways. So if we really want to flag to our colleagues where we might need to do follow-up or check up on something next year, we can do that really easily. And so any of those observations, as I make these notes, all I have to do is pull up the images that I want to see, and I can create notes just like that. So if I want to say, oh, over here, I saw something interesting, I can pop that right in. And what's really cool about this is these notes also can feed really seamlessly into any report that we make. So I'll show you what that looks like. Let's say that these are all the notes that I want to add into my report. I can just click this button right here and immediately generate a report. Scroll down and I can select the image that I used for my monitoring visit this year. And what's really helpful is this is also very easy for us to verify. So we can see exactly when this image came from, and then any of our observations as well. We can zoom in to that example of the trees, see where that's located on the property, before and after source information. I can see who made that note, when we made it, what they saw. Now we also can customize if we wanted, so we can say trees removed, something like that, and then we can save this and put that in our records or share with partners. So forth. Now, important to know for anyone that's doing remote monitoring, of course, we want to make sure that while we're doing this, we're keeping to those land trust standards and practices. So I would, when you're getting into your reporting, make sure that you include any other detail that's going to be helpful here so that you have the information that you want to be reporting across all of your sites. Now, I know a number of land trusts also use some different types of database tools to help manage those records. So something that we have built into Lens are some integrations, for instance, with tools like Landscape and Locate, so that these notes can port directly over into those tools along with all the rest of your easement data. So a lot that you can do there with those notes and reports. So what I think also is another really helpful thing that we can do, again, I'll come over here and I'm going to add another layer on top of this, and that's going to be our parcel data. I'll clean this up a little bit so we can go out of compare mode. So, like I mentioned, we have access to nationwide parcel data through a partnership with a company called Regrid. So, right over here, we can see where those different parcel boundaries lie. And what's very interesting about this as well is that we can get automated alerts when there have been changes. So, if we want to know when, say, a landlord that we work with has transferred their property, if there's been subdivision, if say there was a sale on a neighboring plot, I can come over here to this lookout tab, and I can see some of these notifications that we received. So in this case, owner changed on this particular plot from this owner to this owner, and we can see when that happened. With those parcel ownership details, we also can create parcel ownership reports, which is another really helpful tool. So a lot we can do with that. Now, I want to show you another example where those alerts can come in handy, and let's move to something a little different. So this one over here is going to be more of a working forest example. So this is up in New Hampshire, and so again, I pulled up a before and after comparison here we can take a look at. Looking at 2016 on the left, and 2018 on the right. So obviously there was quite a lot of logging activity that happened in that time. We can see the footprint of that here. I'm going to come back over to my notes, and again, I'm going to sort these so we start at the beginning. So Katie, again, was the one who came in here initially and made these observations. She noticed that there was a sort of larger clearing over here. That's something that we might want to follow up on. This right now is a 1 meter resolution image that we're looking at, by the way. So that's even just from the free USDA data that we have access to. And we can also pull up this area over here where there was a little bit larger clearing. So again, looking at the true color right here, let's do something different. Let's go back to that vegetation data that I mentioned. In this case, again, I'm going to grab before, which looks something like that, and the after, where we can see that's declined. So again, those yellow, orange, white colors is where there's less active vegetation. Katie did an analysis here and see how we can get that seasonal variation. Again, in New England, we've got that leaf drop in the fall, and so we expect to see vegetation decline over the winter. But look at those peaks over the summer. We had a pretty high one here in 2017, then it was much lower in 2018. So that helps us to identify when that change occurred. So dates it to late 2017. Something that I think is really helpful with vegetation change is, again, that lookout feature. So I'll show you exactly what that does. Right here, I've already got a notification to check out. This is where a drop in vegetation was detected. This one was actually from last summer. So here is our before and after, and this area in red is where our machine learning algorithm has detected or estimated the area of impact. So before and after. So sure enough, you can see there's a decline in vegetation. And what I might want to do then is follow up with some true color imagery close to that time to confirm that, yep, I can see right there, that is where some trees have been cut. I can do this based on some preset alerts, but something that's really cool that's a pretty new feature in Lens is we can actually create custom lookout policies for just about any sort of change that we're interested in. So we have data sets ranging from vegetation to surface water, surface moisture, land cover, all kinds of different things here. So that if, let's say, we were interested in a change in land cover, I could very easily grab that data set and say, tell me when something that was measured as tree cover was instead converted to something else. And anytime that happens, I'll get an email alerts that I can then go and follow up on that. So it makes it a lot easier when we're thinking about stewardship. Again, capacity is such a big issue. We have so many areas that often we're monitoring in these kinds of roles, and being able to see everything all the time is just impossible. So having a little bit of an assist here from some of the tools and Lens can really be quite the game changer. Now, again, lookouts, analysis, all these different features are really helpful for a lot of this different kinds of work. We have so many different examples here in Lens that we can take a look at, and a few other just little details that I wanted to share here. When we're looking at any data layers, we can see, again, when those were captured over here. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is that we also can take some of this information and share that into a GIS system, for instance, if that were something we wanted to do for some sort of cartographic work or custom analysis. So if you're familiar with web app tile server use, that's just a link that you can pop into your GIS tool. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can sort of take the information that we're using in Lens and digest these insights, really understand what's happening, and then share that out with all of our partners in all these different ways. There's another kind of cool feature that I'll show you. Let's go back, for instance, to our watershed restoration one. And I'm going to, again, pull up our true color imagery. do our before and after here. Let's go with these two USDA images. Come back over here. I can also share a property map. This is a really handy feature where I can actually share that interactive comparison with external partners. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to send that to the landowner that I'm working with and say, like, hey, look, I was checking out something in your property. Tell me what you're seeing. Is it something that you're familiar with? Can you give me more backstory here? It could be a really great way to engage landowners and other partners to be able to do something like that. So yeah, I think that's a pretty thorough look through some of the different features that we have access to in Lens. Of course, I have lots of different examples here. So depending on what part of the country you're in, what types of issues you deal with when it comes to stewardship, there's plenty of different ways that you can apply this in your own work, I'm sure. But for now, I'll pause and we can go and take a couple of questions from folks. So again, drop any questions you have in the Q&A. Kate is going to hop back on to help with some of those. But thanks again for joining us. And yeah, excited to hear more about what y'all are up to and what you're interested in.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. That was a ton of information. Like he said, if you have any other comments or questions as we're chatting here, please feel free to just grab that Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen and drop your thoughts. We'll just get to as many as we can here. Let's see, we have one about Lookout. They're wondering what kinds of smaller changes can we detect with Lookout? I think you showed kind of like some broader vegetation ones, but maybe how granular does that get?
Yeah, definitely. So the main consideration there is going to be around the data source that you're using for those lookouts. Now, something that I think is really important to keep in mind is that the lookouts are going to work best on things that you can actually measure, right? So something like a vegetation index gives us a numerical value where we can say, oh, vegetation is higher here or lower here. So for something like that, like I mentioned, the Sentinel data is 10-meter resolution. So even just a couple pixels of that would be just fine for triggering an alert. So over here, I'm going to go and take a look at, let's see, there's a really good example actually in Massachusetts that I like for this. Let me grab, I believe it's this one. Yeah, here we go. So I'm gonna go over to my lookouts. Yeah, here we go. Left it in here. This is a good example. So I should say also, this is about a 500-acre preserve, and there's a lot of suburban development surrounding it, right? So we can expect to see quite a bit of change out there. So things like encroachments, things like development on neighboring properties is something we might be concerned with. Now, over here, this little tiny area in red, that's where we got an alert triggered. So before and after. As you can see, it's just a couple pixels of vegetation change. But if I, again, go and take a look at some of the true color imagery, I'm going to grab, so that's August of 21. So let's, as before, do, let's go with, I think probably like this September should still be fine. Yep, so it looks like just a couple of trees, nothing unexpected there. We'll have true color image from 2022 to compare. And we can see right there, that lot was cleared for development. We can actually see some of the equipment right there that's associated with. So pretty small scale change there. I can show you even, we've got the measurement tool built in right here. So that lot is less than 100 feet across. So change about that small, pretty easy for you to spot.
Nice. We have another one around training. Could you chat a little bit more about what kind of training we provide? Maybe if you're starting from square one with this stuff, like how you can get into it.
So make it as easy as possible for you to get started with Lens. So you can just get started by creating your account and adding some users. You can start adding your properties. We've got a lot of support information to help walk you through that. But I think what's most important is just getting to talk to somebody about how to do it. So Allison is on hand to help out with one-on-one trainings. Once you get started, she can walk you through all of those different steps. And again, depending on the questions that you're trying to answer in your stewardship work, it's really important to be able to think about how you can apply these tools for your work specifically. So we're always happy to help you with that. We also publish a ton of educational content on our website. And one other thing I think is just really important is connecting with other folks who have experience with this, who are doing this in your community. Like I said, we've got over 200 land trusts that are doing this today. So chances are a partner organization you work with, somebody you know, might have some experience to share. And one resource that I'll highlight as well, we can learn a lot about remote monitoring generally, is the Land Trust Alliance Remote Monitoring Toolkit. So that was published earlier this year based on some of the results of those grant programs that I mentioned I was working with earlier. So a lot of participants involved in that who have been really excellent at sharing out what they've learned, best practices. So there's a ton of information out there, both within Lens and in the community, that I highly recommend folks take a look at.
Awesome. And I just dropped that one in the chat as well if folks
Thanks.
want to click that link to see. We have a couple questions about pricing here. Maybe we kind of go over the basics. Folks want to know, is there a cost to make an account? Or do you just kind of pay for the data as you go? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So we have a couple different options for that. So here I can pull up some of those pricing options. So we try to keep things really straightforward. So we have both a standard plan that has up to 10 user seats in your organization that you can use however you'd like. We have included in that as well all the different features that we're looking at, including things like automated alerts, tax parcel data. You could do tasking and also streaming to GIS. And then we also have a lighter weight version, which has up to 3 user seats, has a lower price point, and has, again, all the features around things like doing the analysis and having all the public data loaded, things like that. So for each of those, you can either opt for an annual or a monthly plan. We do discount the annual options. And on top of that, I assume for a lot of folks who are on this call, we do have a Lens for Good discount program for nonprofit organizations. So definitely reach out if you're interested in those details as well. I will say right now, I know of you probably are coming into this right off of the Land Trust Alliance rally last week. And so we also right now have a discount program going for folks who can take 25% off of their first year from our rally participants. So again, get in touch if you're interested in some of those programs that you might be eligible for.
Nice. Let's see. We have another one around tasking imagery in that process. Can you share more about what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So tasking, again, is sort of the option for imagery capture where you get more control over how and when imagery is going to be available for the areas that you're interested in. Now, tasking versus that archive data, there's a really specific trade-off. You get more control, but comes at a higher price point. So in Lens, the way that you can access those tools, again, that's available at the standard plan. And so I'm going to come into this portfolio here, where there are a couple of properties that I've marked for tasking. So let's say that these 3 sites, again, these are in New Hampshire, I'm going to select those, and I'm going to come over here to use our built-in tasking estimator tool. Typically with tasking, the hard part is figuring out how to optimize the area that you're requesting to get the lowest cost with the most coverage. So something that we've done here is created a tool that automatically handles that for you. So we can select the properties we're interested in, and then one of the 3 different satellite programs that we're going to task through. So Airbus Pleiades, Pleiades Neo, and Planet SkySat. Let's start with Planet SkySat. So in that case, if I select these 3 properties and run my estimator, I can see that getting imagery for all of those in one swoop is going to cost $677, and this is going to be the minimum capture area. If I want to play around with that, I can say exclude one of those sites, run it again, see what that looks like, and so I can continue to iterate on that. I will say that for tasking, it tends to work best when you have a larger property or properties that are clustered together, especially things that are a little harder to access, where maybe there's a little bit more cost efficiency to tasking imagery. If, let's say, it takes a full day of driving time to get out and back just to go put boots on the ground. So I would think about where tasking is going to be most effective. But when you want to make those orders, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to get those requests in, and then we can put those into vendors and work with them to make sure that you get what you need.
All right, another one here. Can I bring imagery from Lens into GIS?
Yeah, so that's going to be that web map tile server option that I've mentioned. Let's go back to this site for a moment. I'll pull up some imagery to show you exactly how that will work. Let's go again to a true color image. I'm going to select this Airbus. This Airbus data. All right, so when I've ordered that image in Lens, if I wanted to put that into a GIS tool, there's a couple different ways I can do that. I'm going to come back over here to the details to access those. So right here, with any of these images, you're going to be able to do a PNG download of that. So for folks that are familiar, that is going to be just a high resolution image, not geo-referenced, but you can use that for things like presentations or putting into reports. GeoTIFF is an image that's geo-referenced. That means that you can put it into a GIS tool and pull it up like a map. So with certain vendors like Airbus, we're able to do those GeoTIFF downloads. That's the great option that's available both the standard and light subscription plans. Now, again, for the standard plan, you can also stream any of this imagery into your GIS tool through this WebAppTile server link. And we have some more information about this on our website if you're interested in learning how to do it. But all you have to do is load, we've got a link right here that you copy and paste into your GIS tool, whether you're using ArcMap or QGIS, whatever that is. And so that's going to make available all these different image layers for you to work with in there too. So it makes it really easy. Yeah, good question.
I know we're running into time soon, Jake. Do you want to let people know just how to get in contact with us? What's like a good first step?
Yeah, absolutely. So here, I will pull up just on our website. We've got a ton of different resources to learn more if you have any other questions, of course, but feel free to get in touch. Okay, maybe if you can put my email in the chat, reach out directly to me at jake@upstream.tech. I handle all of our partnerships with land trusts, conservation NGOs. We've got other folks on our team who do some really cool work with things like carbon projects and local governments and state agencies. And there are a lot of different folks that are using Lens. But yeah, in general, if you're looking to talk stewardship, give me a shout and I'm always happy to talk more about it. And yeah, check out some of these resources on our website if you're interested in learning more. You also can book a demo with us if you want to take a closer look at some of the specific concerns that you have for the type of work that you're doing. But yeah, always happy to talk with folks who might be able to get some value out of this. I think remote lending is a really helpful tool that's just able to help us get more conservation work done. So yeah, with that, Kate, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, of course. Let's see. Yeah, if there's any other resources you think of that we want to drop in for folks. If not, if you think of a question that you didn't ask today or that we didn't get to, please feel free to email. I think the team is ready to chat.
Yeah. Okay, actually one other thing that probably would be helpful, again, over here, there's just a ton of information in our resources. We'll post the webinar recording here as well. So if there are other folks in your team that didn't get a chance to make it today who'd be interested in watching this, that will be posted on here. But also in our, we've got a lot of educational materials, like I mentioned. We have some about how to monitor conservation easements, as well as the guidebook that we posted for just a quick guide to remote monitoring conservation easements. So I think those might be some really helpful ones for folks as well. But again, just right on our website, you'll find a lot more.
I'll go ahead and drop that link as well to the guidebook. It's a good one. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And like we said, get in touch. We're happy to help how we can.